time constraint. So, okay, hello everyone. And now is the time to continue with the second half of today's webinar, and I'd like to introduce Mr. Jens Eiberger. Jens is a sports scientist and a nutritionist originally from Germany. He is now working as a fitness coach for the national teams for the Football Association of Singapore. He previously worked as the head of the Sports Science Academy at Myanmar Football Federation and also worked as a sports scientist at Resilience Code in Denver, Colorado. He has a bachelor's degree in sports science and a master's degree in performance analysis of sport. He is also a certified nutritionist, a certified strength and conditioning specialist, and a UEFA, the Union of European Football Association, a licensed elite youth coach. He also has a level 1 strength and conditioning coach accreditation from the Australian Strength and Conditioning Association, AFCA. He has years of experience in working with athletes from various sports, such as football, American football, basketball, UFC, baseball, and figure skating. He also played professional football in Germany for the clubs of the Bundesliga 2 and 3, as well as in Sweden. So we are really happy to have you share your experience with us today. And without further ado, over to you, Jens.
So first and foremost, thank you so much, Swe, for the introduction. It sounds very well, and that I did a lot. Indeed, probably I did. However, now I'm currently, as you said, in Singapore working at the fitness coach national teams. And without further speaking, I guess I just share my screen and then I will just start. Does it work now?
Yes, it does. But yes.
Okay.
Okay, cool.
You can just see the presentation, right?
Yes, we can see your presentation.
Okay. So then I'm starting. I mean, today's topic, first of all, thank you for inviting me. And that at least the participants, even though they just had a short lunch break, they're still able to make it. So I hope I can give you an overview. What is sports nutrition? What is the current state of the art? How that potentially can be a field of work for all ongoing nutritionists, dietitians, because that's an evolving topic and it's getting more and more important, especially in professional sports, but not just in professional sports, I guess also on a lower level. Nutrition is getting a crucial part in athletic performance. And after that, I just would start. I guess here's my email, so you can write my email.
No.
You can text me if you have any questions afterwards or whatsoever. So just shoot me an email. I'm also available on LinkedIn and Instagram, so you can also most convenient would be via email. And if everyone can hear me, Swe, if you can confirm that, then I will start now.
Yes.
Okay. So this is the index or the content I will walk today through. So first of all, I'm starting with a short introduction about myself, even though Swe already went through that. Then I give you a short introduction about what is actually sports nutrition, the nutritional needs for sports and different sports, our macronutrients in sports, how is the distribution looking there, why is important and why not, additional factors of sports nutrition, a scope of actually a sports nutritionist. So how is that going to look like on the field? I guess that's more practical for all of you guys, that you kind of see how it's going to work. So wait 1 second, I just have currently some issues. I hope now it works. And then pro athletes nutrition. So I got there some content of how pro athletes do actually work and value their nutrition regarding their sports and how important that is to them. And in the end, a short question and answer where you can feel free, ask all questions, or if there are some doubts, or if you have any areas which I didn't explore, feel free to ask. So short introduction about myself. As we already mentioned, my academic background, I have a Bachelor of Arts in Sports Science at the University of Stuttgart. So there, my bachelor thesis was about applied sports science and soccer and how to train it in an applied training setting. So that was about agility. I was fortunate working there with Hoffenheim. That's a club in the first tier. And some of you might know that the current coach, who is now going to Manchester United, he was the manager there when I was there. Then I did my Master of Performance Analysis in Sports. So that was in 3 different universities where I came across the globe, learned different cultures and environments. And there my topic was about deceleration profiling and the importance, and I would say still, there is some ignorance on deceleration training in professional sports, but that's another topic. I'm a certified nutritionist, as Swe mentioned, with a elite youth coach license from the German Football Federation, CSES, ASCA, and I have a FIFA diploma in sports medicine. And then I just shortly go over my professional background. So I was a professional football player in the 2nd and 3rd tier in Germany. Then I decided going for my bachelor, and on site I could still play. So I did my internship at Erste FC Heidenheim, where I was a youth coach. They're currently playing in the 2nd league. Then I went to America, Denver. Resilience Code is a state-of-the-art facility with all possible recovery modalities, athlete monitoring, screening devices, training tools, and very, very much emphasis on nutrition. And there I came across different sports, not just football. It was mainly American football. It was MMA, the NBA, NFL. So all those American sports. Then I went to Myanmar, and currently I'm working as a fitness coach national teams for the Football Association of Singapore, where I am now. And now let's start. And I would like to start with a short video about what is sports nutrition and how does it actually look like in an applied setting, in a pro setting. And therefore I want to show you a video of a pro cycling team called Team Sky. I don't know if or who knows about that. It was one of the most successful cycling teams, and they're competing every year in the Tour de France. So that's a 23-day event. They have 21 races, so almost every day one race up to 5, 6, 7 hours. So their nutrition is playing a crucial part. But I won't say too much, that you just have a short idea about how a pro cyclist team looks like. Can you see the video, Swe?
Not yet, Jens. It's not working yet.
Okay, then let me just shortly stop sharing. Then I will share the other. Now you should be able to.
Yes.
And I hope you can also hear the sound. Can you hear the sound?
Not yet.
And now?
No.
Okay, let me see now.
No.
Does it work now?
I can hear it. I can see the screen, but not the sound. So, can anyone hear the sound, or is it just me?
No, I'm not actually.
Let me see now. Does it work now?
No. No.
Okay, that's a pity. Let me just.
I think that when you share, you have to share as a video also.
Okay, let me see now. Now it might work.
Now we've got exclusive access to Team Sky.
It works.
Does it work now?
Yes, yes, it does.
Okay, let me just make it a bit more prone to hear. And now.
It's often said that an army marches on its stomach. And I think the same can be said for a professional cycling team, where nutrition plays an increasingly important role. Now we've got exclusive access to Team Sky to see how nutrition plays its part.
The number one goal really is to replenish all of the carbohydrate that you've used. That's the first and foremost, that's what we're trying to achieve. Second, and by no means second in importance, is protein intake after the race, because during a hard stage, you're effectively in a state of protein breakdown, if you like. And then what you need to do is ingest high quality protein to help the muscle recover. And then last but not least is obviously dehydration. So again, depending on the temperature of the race, you'll lose a lot of fluid. We need to put that fluid back in quite quickly. And all three of those things go hand in hand, so that the next day we're ready to race again, if you like.
Let's say we've got a 200-kilometre alpine stage of the Tour de France. What typically would you look to prepare for the riders on a day like that with demands?
Yeah, well, we would be looking at something that not too heavy for your stomach, so steak wouldn't work, for example. We would do something light with fish, chicken would be perfect. And then we would make sure there's a lot of carbs ready for them. They always have a variation of 4 different carbs every night, being rice, quinoa, potatoes, or pasta. So it's up to them which sort of carb they want to fuel with. Make sure they're really carb loaded, and mix that with some light proteins and some good fresh cooked vegetables. That's basically what we used to do.
What about dessert? We know riders have a sweet tooth. What about your favourite? What's Team Sky's favourite dessert?
Well, they really like when I do like a tiramisu every now and then, when I do it full on with cream and sugar and all that. But they're so professional now these days, so they're very strict at what they eat actually. So they kind of stick most to fruit and yogurts. But every now and then we do a bit extra and then go all in.
Good for the morale.
Good for morale.
I understand you're not just the only expert, the riders have been involved, or there's been some input from the team to educate the riders on the importance of understanding their own bodies and the importance of eating the right things, but more importantly, eating the right things at the right times.
Absolutely. I mean, I've got a saying in nutrition, it's called the 3 T's. It's timing, type, and toll. And actually what I've learned over the years, that sometimes the timing of when you ingest that food can sometimes be more important than the type of food that you consume, and also the total amount of food that you consume. And if you get those 3 right all of the time, then you're right on the money for nutrition.
Well, it just goes to show, good nutrition, you'll get your just desserts. Very nice.
Okay, I guess that should at least have given you an idea how sports nutrition looks like in an applied setting. I hope you still can hear me. And I hope you can still see the presentation again.
Yes.
Okay, then we just start with shortly what sport nutrition. So the guy there, he talked about different concepts about the 3 T's, which I also will cover what he meant there and why is it important, and how the Team Sky is actually dealing with it, how different teams, athletes, they're all different kind of components, and what we have to be actually aware of. So first of all, what is sports nutrition? So it's a connection between nutrition, exercise, and well-being from a crucial part of any athlete's competitive and training program. And I can say out of experience, the nutrition is getting more and more important to all athletes. And that's where you guys should come into place, that even in a high performance setting, those nutritionists and those specialists are still missing. What, from my perspective, should change along the way, that we also need specialists in that area, because especially from a fitness or strength and conditioning perspective, if the nutrition is not on point, the benefits and outcomes, what we want to see physically, are obviously not going to be as high as if we would have also the nutrition tailored to the athletes. And that's why it's crucial that there are protocols and evidences about the quantity, the structure, and as the guy just talked about, the timing or the food intake, to ensure that athletes can train more efficiently and effectively, because different athletes have different training times. Athletes are different in their body constitution. So we have a lot of variables which we have to take into account. So we can't just leave it as of one and just make it for the entire team. It has to be tailored. Optimal nutrition can enhance athletic performance. So it's always about the performance, but in the end, it's also about metabolic adaptations to training. Much more important, speed up recovery processes, and in the end reduce the risk of injury and illnesses. So that's probably the most crucial part, reduce the risk of injury and illnesses, because every coach, every team, every association wants their players healthy, and nutrition is playing an important role there to protect them from potentially getting hurt. We can't just exclude and say they will not get hurt with that nutrition, but at least we're reducing the likelihood of getting injured. And it's probably the single most complementary factor to any physical active individuals or elite athlete. And you will see later on some comments of some pro athletes, how much emphasis there is currently ongoing on nutrition. And I would say within the next 2, 3, 5, 10 years, the emphasis is even getting higher. The longevity of the player is getting longer. And that obviously comes hand in hand with a proper nutrition. Then we go over the nutritional needs for sports. So good nutrition assists in the ability to train obviously intensely, as well as in muscle recovery and metabolic adaptation to endurance exercises, but not just to endurance, also to all these high intensity sports or sprint events. So the energy obviously should derive from a wide variety of available foods that provide carbohydrates, proteins, fats, and micronutrients. I will go more in detail about that later on. And we always want to have that with normal food. So I'm not a big fan of supplementation, especially if we are speaking about not high performance sports, general sport and the use. We should always try to implement normal food, real food, better than supplements, because supplements are just supplementing, as the name is called. And the real food is still the best choice, which athletes should go to. However, at some instances, supplements are having their place. I will shortly touch on that later on, but that's a totally other topic. And the aim is, as I just said, is with a well-balanced diet to have sufficient energy in order to maintain the energy balance in athletes with increased requirements because of physical ability and activity. And it might be actually challenging to meet the energy needs of athletes with a high body weight and height who take part in high volume intense training. So if we just think about, for example, a boxing fight, and you have these 2-meter tall people weighing probably 100 kilo plus, and they're fighting there 12 rounds of 2 minutes. So that's almost 1 hour with the breaks in between. It's almost impossible to kind of hit that energy demand just with real food. And there we have to be very, very cautious that at least we meet there the energy needs. And it's different to every athlete. So young athletes have different nutritional needs than older. So young athletes probably need to eat more and different types of food as of their augmented puberty and growth. So have female compared to their male counterparts different ones, as in females usually have a higher percentage of body fat, as in compared to their male ones, which are having a higher percentage of muscle mass. That's why also we see differences here, and not just those. I will mention later on even more ones which are giving some influence on the nutritional needs for different athletes. So a negative energy balance, so that's a common I would say issue what we see not just in endurance athletes such as runners, cyclists, swimmers, and triathletes, because obviously those guys, they have events running 2, 3, 4, or even longer hours. And to get that amount of food in, what they are actually burning while doing their exercise is very, very difficult, almost impossible. That's why there are different strategies how to overcome those negative energy balances, which I will mention later on, but it's not just in endurance athletes. So it's also in sports where they want to modify body composition and size, such as gymnastics, skating, dancing, wrestling, and boxing. And I have their experience from the MMA and the UFC. So those guys, obviously, they have to hit a certain weight that they are eligible to fight. And usually a couple of weeks or even just 1 week beforehand, they probably still have 2-3 kilos more than they should have for the weigh-in. So there they just apply different strategies in like sauna, that they're just losing a lot of water. What we have to be cautious about, then afterwards they just refill it and probably be 2 kilos heavier again, but just for the event of weighing, they need to have this requirement, and that's one strategy which seems to work now, but from a nutritional standpoint is not ideal, and we have to be very, very cautious about that. And then historically, female athletes are more prone to eating disorders, which obviously leads to a disturbed energy balance, because female athletes are still very, very much about their outer appearance. So they want to look skinny rather than muscular. So that's why they're tending to eat too little than they actually should. And there's this so-called female triad, which includes the disturbed eating patterns, especially of the menstrual disorders and low bone mineral density, which we see across different sports. And that can, in the end, this negative energy balance lead actually to the female triad, that they have menstrual disorders. So if that appears, that's too late and intervention needs to happen. And even further, if they compete in high intensity training, it very often decreases the appetite and changes hunger patterns. So there we even have to be more cautious of how we deal with that, and potentially giving them food, very nutritious and calorie rich, mainly in fluid, as a fluid, as it is easier to digest and we can get higher calories, as in the food would be solid. And so now I just was speaking about the nutritional needs for sports. And now I'm covering different athletes of different sports. So here we just have 3 different athletes. I don't know who knows whom. So the first one is Lebron James. He's probably the most famous basketball player currently in the NBA. The other one, top right, is Cristiano Ronaldo. Potentially you have heard of him, as he's one of the best football players currently ongoing. He's playing for Manchester United, and he's relatively old, 35, 36. So is Lebron James. And at the lower right, we have Michael Phelps, who is an American former competitive swimmer, and the most successful and most decorated Olympian of all time. And he actually won 28 gold medals. So what I just want to highlight here, so we have 3 different sports, and obviously the nutritional needs for the different sports are totally different. So that being said, it might be still easy just for a basketball team, as in is high intensity. So they probably have a game of 60 minutes with a break in between. So it's probably 60 to 90 minutes. So we have to kind of obviously value different macronutrients more than the others. It's very, very much probably on carbohydrates as well as on proteins. On the top right, we have football players. So if we just speak about a team, also here we know it's 90 minutes, 120. So probably we also can induce some strategies to have food in between. So whether they are fluid, whether it might be a banana. So there are different strategies what we have to take care. And at the lower right corner, we have Michael Phelps, who is a swimming athlete. He might just have an event of 60 seconds. So there, the fat requirements might be very, very little, as in they're just important of an endurance event. But for him, probably this fast glycolytic system will just work mainly in his event. So I will probably have to work there on high GI food just before the event, as in it is lasting very, very shortly. So those are 3 different sports where it might be still very simple to kind of value different nutritional aspects. However, now seeing that picture, those are also 3 different sports, but we can say all of those 3 are actually running events. So that being said, we have there on the left, Renaud Laviani. He's a French pole vaulter. He won the gold medal in 2012 in the Olympics and a silver medal in Rio. One of the best ones. Then on the top right, we have Usain Bolt, the fastest man in the world. And on the right corner, we have Mo Farah. He's a British long distance runner and the most successful British athlete in the modern Olympic game history. So what I want to see here, so all of them have a relatively similar sports. All of them have running events. Renaud Lavigny, he needs to be fast in his walk on, that he can jump over there. So his event is relatively short. Usain Bolt, 100 meter, 200 meter, also very short. He has to work as fast as possible. However, Mo Farah, he's also running, but he's running 2-3 hours. So there, the nutritional needs for every athlete, even though it's similar sports, is totally different. If we're working with individual athletes, might still make it possible, and it is individualized. But if we're then later on going to team setting, it might be even more difficult. As Renaud Lavigny, he also has to take care of his weight, as he can't be too heavy. The same as Mo Farah for Usain Bolt is similar. However, he can put on more muscle mass as he might be faster. And this obviously needs to accompany it with the appropriate nutrition. And then lastly, I don't know who is aware and who is familiar with these sports. It's American football is very, very the most common sport, one of the most common ones in America. And here we have actually one team. So those 3 players, they play in one team, just at different positions. And that just shows that even in one team setting, you have totally different athletes and they need to have different nutritional needs. So on the left, we have a defensive tackle. So he has to be heavy. He's not running much. He's not very endure. However, he has to still overcome 4 quarters of 12 minutes. He has to tackle the others away. So he has to still be explosive to get to the quarterback. So his requirements regarding nutrition are totally different than the top right one. That's Tom Brady, a quarterback, who's mainly just standing in there and throwing the balls. But probably for him, the most demanding part is mentally, as he has to have visual scanning. And how do we overcome that with nutrition is tricky. And is different than the right corner, where we have a wide receiver who needs to be very, very explosive, who needs to sprint as fast as possible, probably similar as Usain Bolt, just not the distance, to do a lot of cutting, jumping. So he has to be explosive, strong. So probably his is mainly looking like carbohydrates and protein. However, Tom Brady will not eat that many carbohydrates, as he might feel sluggish because he's not using it. So he might eat more protein as well as fat. So this just shows you that even in one sports, we can't just have an overall view of nutrition. How does it look like? Because it's such different from different athletes in different sports. So that just gives you a short idea of how big the variety and the needs of sports nutrition and expert is actually in sports. In America, we see that very, very much. In other sports, we're still lacking behind that. But I guess that gave you an understanding of the importance and also the difficulty dealing with different teams and different athletes. Then we go shortly further about other topics and nutritional needs. So travel and training also influence the food availability and safety. And safety should here more mean it's about the careful planning around travel schedule. And that's of vital importance, because if you have to imagine you're traveling 12 hours, potentially to a different country, different time zone, the food might not be available, their preferences of food. So you have to take all these little things into account, how you overcome that. Also while traveling, is there availability to get food? Are we getting that on the flight? Are we going to take that with us? So there are a lot of things we have to take into account, which I will shortly cover later on a bit more. Then obviously insufficient energy intake, what is a big problem, can result once in weight loss, especially of muscle mass, injury, illness, increased prevalence of overtraining syndrome, and ultimately decreased sport performance. And you might think, okay, that is not happening in a high performance setting, but even this is happening because they might just look out of aesthetics, or they want to lose some body fat and then they overdo it with the nutrition. So if we don't have specialists here, it can potentially even go more negative than positive. And that's something important what the athletes should be aware, that they maintain an energy balance to suit their energy expenditure, and they have 4 to 6 meals per day, including nutrient-dense food. That is very, very general, especially for team sport athletes and all high performance athletes. If they can, they will probably get 4 to 6 meals in, as in they have very, very high energy demands. And to meet their energy balance, they rather eat small food than big foods, because if they train twice a day, they don't want to be full. So that's another aspect we have to take into consideration. So that's why there is more about small meals and more meals, higher meal frequency, as we also do not want to have these insulin spikes all the way and all the time. So we want to overcome that with having a regular meal frequency. And here you just see some kind of recommendation of different calorie intakes per day. And the energy requirements are nowadays calculated either by the dietary reference intakes or predict equations. So nowadays the field of sports nutrition has departed from calculating carbohydrates requirement as of a percentage of the total energy. And instead now we usually express that as grams per kilograms of body weight. And there we already can see, so at the first instance, a normal diet, we usually say 25 to 35 calories per kilogram per body weight. Then if we have a moderate level of intense training, 2 to 3 hours a day. So there we potentially already speak about the high performance setting, potentially about football, about cricket, about all those sports. And here the requirements, you see that there's a big variety. So smaller athlete who's probably less muscular needs far, far less than a tall athlete. And if we then go to the third tier where we speak about high volume intense training, 3 to 6 hours a day, 1 to 2 sessions a day, 5 to 6 times a week. That can be still football, but there is more endurance sports, maybe cycling. There we speak about the elite athletes and they potentially need up to 10,000, 12,000 calories on a race day. So to overcome that with a normal nutrition, very challenging, but still possible. But this also just shows you again how big the variety is there. And the different demands of different athletes. And then I shortly want to dig into the carbohydrates because as it is potentially the main source for most athletes, and it is essential in physical active individuals. But also here the timing is very, very important according to the trainings. And then I will shortly later on speak a bit more about the pre-workout nutrition, as well as the in-session nutrition, if it is possible, as well as the post-workout nutrition, what should aid in recovery, and all those little things we best want to tailor for our athlete. And now you can just imagine if you're in a team setting of 30 athletes and you want to have that tailored, that's a challenging job, but also very tricky to speak with the athletes regarding that and how to overcome those things. Then obviously the muscle glycogen and the blood glucose are the primary sources of energy for all the contracting muscles, and optimal dietary carbohydrate intake enhances recovery and optimal glycogen stores for the next session. So this is our aim. I always like to use the analogy of a car. So if our car is the athlete, we want to fuel him as best as we can. And their carbohydrates is a source number one. Whether it's an endurance event, whether it's in a high intensity event, we want to meet the requirements needed for different sports. And that should be tailored, what I'm going to show you later on. So the amount of carb obviously differs to the amount of intensity and the training, and it should be periodized. So that being said, we have also, from a physical perspective, we have periodization. How to best get the athletes in the best shape. For example, if we have Saturday a game, we obviously load differently, and that should be in accordance with the nutrition. We have there also nutrition periodization according to the loading. Let's say on a game day, they probably have the highest amount of carbohydrates. However, the day after, they might reduce on the carbohydrates, stock up on protein and fats as we want to aid in recovery. So those are just the little things we have to be aware that we can't just say every day eat the same stuff. So that should be tailored to the amount and intensity of training of each individual. And the most important aspects of carbohydrate is obviously obtaining the daily carbohydrate requirements and ensuring gastrointestinal comfort. As our athletes are training a lot, we should avoid that they have any issues with bloating or with their belly, as in they don't feel comfortable, because that's even more important than potentially what they eat. If they eat the right stuff, but they don't feel comfortable, that's something which is not the right way, and which should change the other way around. Rather, they feel comfortable, potentially didn't eat 100% right, but if they feel right, it means more than what we very often just apply from the paper. So it's about the individual. And here we just see some recommendations from the IOC regarding low intensity or skill-based activities. So that might be, let's say, a snooker or archery. Here we're speaking about 3 to 5 grams of kilograms body weight a day. And all these different sports obviously include pre, during, and post-training intake. Very, very important, the individual tolerance and preference, and that they eat nutrition-dense food and choices. If we speak about moderate exercise program, 1 hour a day, that might be your normal yoga class, what you do. The endurance program, that's moderate to high intensity. There we're speaking potentially about football, 1 to 3 hours a day. We just have one session and then we just go all over. Strength trained athletes, might be weightlifting, and then extreme sports. There is a marathon or really high extreme athletes, or professional athletes, and there you see the demands are much, much higher than if we just speak about a normal non-professional athlete. And then shortly coming about the timing. So before exercise, obviously the athletes have limited glycogen stores in the body, and they will only last for approximately 90 minutes to 3 hours during moderate to high intensity exercise. So that being said, if we speak about the marathon, it goes 3-4 hours. So there is impossible to have such a high glycogen stores that they can raise the entire session. So there, probably the during exercise fueling is even more important. Okay. And there, one strategy would be carbohydrate loading to elevate muscle glycogen stores and to increase endurance and exercise performance. I will shortly go after that more in detail. How does that look like, the carbohydrate loading? But here are the requirements of before exercise. So say general fueling, more than 90 minutes before, and we usually say 3 hours best. So they should get 7 to 12 grams per kilogram body weight per 24 hours. For example, pre-event fueling, you see if it's shorter to the actual start of the event, they probably get 1 to 4 grams per kilogram body weight, best in a fluid manner. They should be low in fiber. And here very, very much again, it is about their individual tolerance. So how they feel with the food, how they actually, what they like. So what are their preferences? So those things we have to take into account. And then I'm coming now to carbohydrate loading. So I show there a picture on the right. That's again a cycling team, and we so call that in nutritional speaking pasta party. So that being said, it was very, very long assumed that, yeah, the 3, 4, 5 days before and every day a pasta party that we're loading our carbohydrate stores. That's right, but just in a certain manner, in a certain amount. And nowadays studies show a bit differently. So regarding that carbohydrate loading, so the IOC recommends 7 to 12 hours per kilogram, grams per kilogram body weight for 24 hours. And then I would say the 2-3 days before, yes, we tell the players they should eat a higher amount of carbohydrates as we want to fill the glycogen stores as they usually still train and replenish them. So that's why we want to ensure that for the race day or for the game or for the highest loading, they come in with full stores, full glycogen storages. And obviously carb loading is a strategy that involves those changes to training and nutrition, which at one point maximizes the muscle glycogen stores prior usually to endurance exercise lasting longer than 90 minutes. It is also very important to maintain muscle tissue stores, which can be decreased with low glycogen stores. And now recent evidence suggests that 24 to 36 hours prior to an event, they should increase that, combined with appropriate training, tapering, and rest, so that the volume and intensity is decreasing. However, the food intake is increasing. And the traditional approach, so that's the recent evidence, so the traditional approach of carbohydrate loading was usually 3 to 4 days to an event, but that was based on physical active rather than well-trained athletes. So athletes should cope with that. And in 2 days, they should be able to fill their glycogen stores rather than just a normal physical active person. And an increase in liver and muscle glycogen stores, as well as we have to take care of the optimal fluid intake is needed for every peak performance that will be achieved. And symptoms, if it shouldn't be achieved, could be low levels of energy. They have heavy legs. They're saying, okay, coach, I'm hitting a wall. I can't run further. Slow rate of recovery, loss of concentration, dizziness. In the end, if it's very, very much, they potentially even faint. So those are symptoms of a lack of carbohydrates, lack of energy. The glycogen stores are depleted. And with those strategy of carbohydrate loading, so-called pasta parties, we can overcome those issues. Then during an event, so common complaints during endurance event includes also here fatigue. And those are usually a result of low muscle glycogen stores. So we can obviously overcome that with snacks, best in a fluid way, but also with a banana or a bar or potentially some sweets. And the type, amount of, and timing of carb intake during exercise is important. And also here should be tailored to individual preference. Even though we say every athlete should eat it in that and this amount, but if players do not feel comfortable with it, we rather let them stay like it is. And if they still perform, it is good. So there we just do not copy paste from the books and say you need to do that, as in they're still people. And we still have to treat them like people. And the requirements in these terms of the amount during an event who lasts more than 60 minutes is usually 0.7 grams kilogram per body weight per hour, the carbohydrate intake. And here we see that again. So those are during exercises, obviously exercises lasting 90 minutes, 2 hours, 3 hours. Then the needs are much, much higher than if you just have a short event, less than 45 minutes. So Michael Phelps, he will not need any snack in between, or even a Usain Bolt. It would be also impossible as it is just a short event. And it's very, very good as it is written there. If it's transportable carbohydrates should be always included, so the people are aware, and we emphasize on that. When they come in, for example, in a football setting, that they always have food with them on the go. We also provide that. But yeah, there is very, very much about education as well. And then after exercise, so obviously speedy refueling is particularly important when there is less than 8 hours of recovery time between events of training sessions. And obviously that optimizes muscle glycogen resynthesis. And the post-exercise carbohydrate, it ranges, anything between 1 to, I would say, even 1.5 grams per kilogram body weight. It should be in small regular snacks, so they shouldn't have a large meal at the initial stage. It might be discomfortable for them. And it best should be ingested as fast as possible. So we recommend actually 90 minutes after the exercise in order to achieve those higher glycogen levels. If an athlete rests, let's say for 1 to 2 days, then the nutrient timing strategy are probably not as important. However, if we're speaking about high performance setting, we want to get them refueled and refuel their glycogen stores as fast as possible. Obviously, here again, according to their activity level, as a distance runner might need much more at the initial stage than a sprinter. And then that's a new approach and a new strategy. It's called the train low, compete high strategy. And what does that mean? It's a new concept with regards to the role of periodization of carbohydrate intake, and is more prevalent in endurance athletes, as in of marathon runners, cyclists, than of in high intensity people. And that being said, an athlete should train in a depleted muscle glycogen state to elicit a carbohydrate response, and then switch to a high carb intake when competing to ensure optimal exercise performance. So that being said, they're getting on a depleted muscle glycogen stage into the exercise, as in their body hopefully adopts then well, and can utilize fat better than carbohydrates, as in of long events, mainly energy source will be fat, so that they can work on their fat stores better than carbohydrates and use the carbohydrates at a later stage. And it appears that there is actually increased transcriptional activation of enzymes involved in carbohydrate metabolism and improvement in the adaptive response that favor then the so-called fat metabolism. However, still further research, I would say, is needed, that any clear recommendation can be made, but we currently see that in all these endurance events that they're already applying that, and it seems also to work for some athletes, but for some athletes neither. Then we go about protein, and there obviously increased requirements in the case of strength or resistance training, because protein supports muscle protein synthesis, reduces muscle breakdown, and repairs muscle damage. And at even endurance exercises, probably they have an increased leucine oxidation, and therefore also the endurance athletes may have slightly higher protein requirements than their sedentary counterparts. And the daily protein requirements are obviously elevated in strength, speed, or endurance training events. And here also it depends on the exercise intensity and duration. Even the temperature, the gender, and age, it all influences the protein requirements of our athletes. And there is actually research, and it's confirmed that there is benefit of whey and milk protein because of their high leucine content of milk protein, and it's even more beneficial to an isolated soy protein. So that's a supplement which we might want to recommend. But also here we have to be cautious about the supplements and the supplementation, and I want to mention it later on again. And here also that optimal timing of protein intake should be considered when obviously determining and prescribing protein requirements, as this can lead to faster recovery and improved adaptations after the trainings. And this is the daily protein requirements for physical athletes according to the IOC, and the protein intake above these guidelines, I would say, does not have any additional benefit. So everything above 2.5 grams per kilogram body weight is not needed, but you also see there that even high volume of intensity training, those people probably have to hit the 2 grams of kilogram per body weight. So if we speak about a 70 kilogram heavy athlete, he probably needs to consume 140 grams of protein. And if the athlete is not aware of that, they usually won't hit that. So we really have to emphasize on that, especially in strength and high intensity sports, where strength is playing an initial role. And nowadays in current sports, all sports are getting more athletic. So that's why you will see more and more stronger and more athletic people, why they obviously have to assist with the proper protein requirements for their sports. And then the timing here. So before exercise, obviously depending on the individual's exercise duration and fitness level, protein should be included with carbohydrates in the pre-event meal before resistance exercise or when a desired change in body composition is required. So the guidelines are 0.15 to 0.25 grams per kilogram body weight, with the recommended obviously carbohydrates 3 to 4 hours before training and competition, and protein should be ingested after exercise at a time that is obviously associated with optimal muscle protein synthesis, what I will shortly go then afterwards and during an exercise. So the evidence with regards to the benefit of the addition of protein to carbohydrate solution during exercise is inconclusive yet, as it might be even more uncomfortable for their digestion to include high amounts of protein. So that's why the IOC also refers that it suggests that the co-ingestion of carbohydrates and essential amino acids is potentially beneficial before and during resistance exercises, as it increases the substrate availability and also the exercise performance. The anabolic hormonal environment is probably improved, and it stimulates muscle protein synthesis. And after exercise, that's the most crucial timing for protein, as in the primary goals of recovery should be to provide sufficient fluid, electrolytes, energy, and carbohydrates to first instance replace obviously muscle glycogen stores and facilitate recovery. However, the addition of protein can and will provide amino acids for the maintenance and repair of muscle protein as soon as possible. And also adding here small amount of creatine, as it is proven that it improves performance to the carbohydrate and protein mixture post-exercise is beneficial to optimize the adaptations of resistance training. And here the recommendations are 20 to 25 grams of high quality protein or high biological value protein after resistance training, best 30 to 1 hour post-exercise. And the dietary protein from a choice, I would always go, especially in youth athletes, and if we go for natural food, say a low fat milk, a flavored one, as it actually shows beneficial improvement in muscle synthesis. So chocolate milk and all those beverages are a very, very good choice, as it is a milk protein. We still have the fast carbohydrates in there. So that's a good choice for all people working with athletes, not just on a professional level, also on a youth level. And then the fat requirements. So the amount of required fat depends very, very largely on the training status and the goals of the athlete. They're probably alike and slightly higher than those in non-athletes, and it's important to consume adequate amounts of fat to ensure optimal health, maintenance of energy balance, optimal intake of essential fatty acids, and fat-soluble vitamins. And a moderate fat intake, usually of 20 to 30% of total energy of athlete, is recommended. However, in some athletes, as we just heard with the train low, compete high strategy can increase of up to 50% of actually the total energy for high volume training. Usually we say training more than 40 hours a week, like the Ironman or marathon. Those people usually adopt a strategy, a high fat strategy, but also other people, in order to reduce body fat or lose body weight, there the fat intake of 0.5 to 1 gram of kilogram body weight a day is suggested. Then I'm also including here the fluid in electrolyte, and it is of such an importance because a decrease in sport performance is evident if 2% or more of an athlete's body weight is lost through sweat. And that's a very common issue and problem I faced across different sports, especially in Asian countries where it's very humid and high, that people are already coming dehydrated to the training, and then they obviously won't perform. So that's probably the first aspect everyone wants to address for team or individual athlete, to stay hydrated. And they should not just rely on the thirst as an accurate indicator of fluid needs. So there is good to weigh the body weight before and after an exercise to determine actually their sweat loss. And it is also recommended that in order to maintain that fluid balance and hypohydration, fluid should be ingested at a rate of 0.5 to 2 liters an hour in extreme conditions. And there should be frequent, I would say, every 5 to 20 minutes if possible. For example, in a football match, ingestion of small amounts, and it should be increased obviously in hot and humid environments. And those are the recommendations. So before exercise, prehydration should be initiated several hours. So it shouldn't be just pre-event. So we should best in the morning before the event or the evening afterwards. And the recommendation is beverages and sodium containing drinks and also salted snack can increase the sensation of thirst and retain fluids. So that's why we try to avoid that. Then during an exercise, they should contain obviously carbohydrates, but also electrolytes, as we lose electrolytes through the session, through our sweat. And then after exercise, if you weigh your athlete before and after, they should at least drink that much amount as they lost in their body weight. So if a guy lost 2 kilograms of body weight, he's advised at least to drink 2 liters, not in one setting, but at least that he's aware to replenish that as soon as possible. And then I'm shortly want to just address some additional factors of sports nutrition where the scope today probably might be far too, or the timing might be too less to cover all these areas. So that's about micronutrient requirements, obviously all vitamins and minerals that are essential nutrients in terms of providing health benefit. So that's an area which I do not address today, but which is very, very important as well, especially in a high performance, more in an individual setting. Then the supplementation. So they're apparently effective and general safe supplements. So it includes protein, creatine, essential amino acids, even caffeine, water, just some carbohydrate electrolyte solutions, sodium phosphate even, and beta-alanine. However, some supplements might have a beneficial effect on athletic performance, but as I said before, no amount of supplementation will compensate for inadequate dietary intake. So that's why I'm a big fan of real food. And with the supplementation, there are so many brands currently out. And if we just buy without being aware, usually we don't get a batch tested product. So what does that mean? It has to be on the anti-doping list and it has to be batch tested that it's actually safe to take. So if you usually just go in a store, buy a product that is not safe, and a bad case, if your athlete takes this, he's potentially getting detected as doped if he has to go on a doping test. So that's why we should emphasize our athletes regarding that. And if we prescribe something, it should be always batch tested. Then regarding nutrition periodization, so I just mentioned them shortly, that we also have physically, obviously, periodization loading pattern, and that should the same apply to nutrition, that we periodicize the nutrition according to different needs. So if there is a high training day, the carbohydrate needs might be much, much higher than on a low training day. So we really want to individualize and go there very, very much in depth to make the best out of our athletes and to increase their performance as much as possible. And a nutrition on travel. So there are different considerations we have to take into account. What do we have potentially on the airport? Do we have time to get there some food in? Do we need to bring something on with us? On the travel, if it's in the bus, can we have there some food? Is there something available? So you have a nutritionist and dietitian have to be aware of that. And have to plan ahead. Also post-exercise, for example, just in the changing room, do we have there some proteins available, some snacks, some bananas? For example, in the halftime, what do we have available here and there? So all these things has to be taken care of and are very, very much important. Another aspect is the nutrition as an injury prevention. So that's key in high performance settings, that we want to prevent injuries as much as we can. And nutrition is playing a key role. How that is done, that's another topic. But that's something also injured players, they eat probably different than a healthy athlete. So we have to be really aware of all those aspects. And then nutritional needs for specific groups. For example, a pregnant woman might need differently, as she might still compete than a normal female athlete. People with disease, people who are vegetarian or even vegan, how we overcome this. Different cultures and religions, so they have their special preference and we still want to have them eating those kind of stuff. So how can we overcome that? So those things are just some topics which are still in the scope of a sports nutritionist and of a dietitian. So those are other areas which still can be explored, and those are very, very much in depth, but it just shows you that it's a very complex job and you have to think and care about a lot of stuff. As you know, if you have 30 individuals or even more on your team and you want to give the best support to each and every one of them. Then I'm going one more further. how is actually a scope of sports nutritionist look like. And there in the background, I just have your football national team, and we just give that as an example, as we would be a nutritionist of the football national team of Nepal. What we actually have to take into consideration, how we would approach it. And the first one is potentially body composition assessment. So how do we do that? Is it a body fat assessment? Are we potentially getting a nutrition diary from the athletes and work on that? What are the nutritional preferences of our athletes? So how do we implement this of our football team? Is that something we need to change? Are we already very well doing there, so that we just have their initial assessment where we're at? Then the second part is the current nutrition environment, as in of your national team. So I'm not certain how it's going to look like, but obviously you need to have the club understanding as well as the federation understanding of the nutrition, the players and staff understanding. Do they understand the importance of nutrition? Is that already of emphasis? Current practices in the team. So do we actually have some pre-meal together? Are we having the team 24 hours together? Do we need to get them nutrition plans back home? Are there already currently some nutrition talks going on? What is the local food in Nepal? How can we implement that on a still high performance basis if it shouldn't fit the nutritional needs, that they still enjoy it, because that's most important, that they still enjoy food, but also nutritionist food and healthy food can be enjoyable. Then next is a time of the season and even the week in a day. So are we in the pre-season? So probably there the loading is higher. We implement more carbohydrates. We might have some carbohydrate drinks in the session. Are we in season? How is the week looking like? Do we have any physical targets of the day? As in today will be physically very tiring, so that we overcome that with the nutrition. The next one is the high performance nutrition setting, as in of our federation. So how does that look like in Nepal? Our food provided at training, pre-training, during training, post-training should be ensured. Do we have meals together? So the player availability, how much do we actually have influence on the players? Do we just see them 2 hours a day, or do we have them more often around? Is there supplementation needed, and how so, and in which extent? So those are all the things we have to consider. And then the nutrition periodization and the traveling, what I just mentioned. How is the tournament schedule looking like? So you as a nutritionist have to schedule the nutrition around, probably meet the chef, maybe bring some local food over, what the players like, liaising with the hotel, what kind of food we have. How is the training loading looking like? So all these things, we need to ensure that from a nutritional standpoint, our athletes for the match day are 100% fueled and are able to perform. And in the end is about education. So that's a big part. We as a nutritionist or dietitian, we need to educate the people, not just our players, the staff, everyone around, how important it is. And if it is neglected, that it influences the entire performance, not just from a physical perspective, also from other aspects. So we need to really emphasize on the education, and in the end, everything is individual. And for that, I want to show you another video again, a scope of a sports nutritionist. So that's a American university, Texas A&M University, which is very well known for the athletic program. And they obviously have some specialized nutritionists. So there, I just want to show you how is there going to look like. And you can hear that again.
My name is John Tangway. I'm a registered dietitian nutritionist, and I'm the assistant athletic director for performance nutrition at Texas A&M University. My undergraduate degree was in zoology, and I was always interested in the life sciences, but didn't really know how I wanted to apply it. So I ended up taking a grad class in nutritional biochemistry. During my first rotation in my dietetic internship, I worked here at Texas A&M during fall football camp and just loved it. And that was how it all kind of clicked for me. As far as sports dietetics, it's really exciting. It's a really growing field, and it's a great time to be a part of this. We have 3 full-time sports dietitians here on staff. We work with all 22 teams here at Texas A&M to make the nutrition services available for all of our athletes. Texas A&M is in the SEC West. We were in one of the most competitive conferences in college football, and it's really rewarding to work with these elite athletes, and help them to customize their nutrition and to really make the most out of how they're fueling their athletic performance. My day starts with breakfast at 6 a.m. and goes all the way through dinner at 8 p.m. Workouts generally start around 7 o'clock. So I'm in setting out hydration products for our athletes, snacks, and other nutrition supplies that they can have around their training. We serve 3 meals a day, breakfast, lunch, and dinner in our dining hall. So I'm in there interacting with the athletes, helping them put their plates together at meal times. And we want to make sure that if they're not getting what they need from their diet, that we provide them with additional vitamins and minerals to really support their performance. We weigh the guys in before and after practice to help monitor hydration, making sure that they're hydrated throughout the week and give them education on how to rehydrate themselves. Our athletes are working hard. They're stressing their bodies out there at practice. So it's really important that we're making sure that when they come off the field, they get the nutrients that they need, they get the protein, they get the carbohydrates, they get the fluids to recover, and then go up to dinner and eat a good solid meal. One of the things I like about the job is just the personal connection that you have with the athletes. You really get to know them. You get to know what foods they like, what foods they don't like. You think about the individual athletes and really try to customize things to meet their specific needs. I work very closely with our chef and our dining hall to write menus that are not only healthy, but are fun and are creative, and really encourage them to come in and eat and really enjoy the food and make them into a better athlete and a healthier individual as well. When it comes to counseling, a lot of my counseling interactions are casual in the weight room, in the dining hall, giving guys feedback on what they're doing from a recovery standpoint, from a hydration standpoint. We do one-on-one counseling in the office. If there's guys who want more in-depth information, I can make the meal plans. If the athletes have clinical issues that are affecting their nutrition, we do clinical nutrition counseling as well. And then we work with administrators, making sure that there are places where we can distribute the nutrition supplies that the athletes need when we're designing new facilities. For me, when I'm eating well and eating healthy, it just makes me feel better. I'm an endurance athlete, run 2 or 3 marathons a year. I use my knowledge to help fuel my body, and I love to share, my passion for that with the athletes. I think it's really important and exciting, us as registered dietitians, working with individuals to help keep them healthy and live a healthy and happy, long, productive life.
This is Lumen, the first device for hacking your metabolism.
Okay, so here again, I hope that gave you at least some overview and actually some in-depth knowledge of how it looks like as a sports nutrition on field. And that was just the same what I just spoke about, that all these different considerations you have to take into account. And are very important in a setting. I guess that also shows you how diverse a sports nutritionist job is in a high performance setting. And I hope that is one of the areas where some of our audience is maybe leaning into. And then shortly, just some pro athletes nutrition. So what they say, so here we have Gwen Jorgensen, is an Olympic gold medalist in triathlon. And she's saying front load your meals for the day. So I used to struggle with a decrease in performance late in the day, and I'd feel hungry in the afternoon. So my nutrition suggests I front load my meals. So this is very, very like, say, the pasta party or the carb loading. So that means making my first 2 meals more calorie dense and making dinner a light meal, because that's due to her preference. Other athletes might not like that. So for breakfast, I will have often a large bowl of oatmeal with peanut butter, coconut butter, and fruit, and then put 2 eggs on top. I'll fuel with a Red Bull during my morning workout. So that's the pre-workout and the intra-workout drink actually. And afterwards, I have a full-fat yogurt with nuts and berries. Lunch is usually red meat with rice, veggies, and cheese. This keeps me energized and all the way through the mid-morning and early evening sessions. So that just shows you how pro athlete deals with all this kind of stuff and is implementing different strategies. Here again, to the preference. Here we speak about the endurance athlete, where it also shows that she's actually putting some fat in her post-workout meal which might different to other sports and athletes. Then here we have another athlete. It's Rebecca Brunson, is a 5-time WNBA champion. And she's saying, throughout the years, I have received plenty of advice on nutrition. Some of it's good and some of it's plain silly. I've tried different diets and clean eating only protein and veggies, drinking only juice, parting way with sugars and carb altogether. Some ways have been more successful than others. I have gotten older and I find some things work better for others, and what is given for great for you may not be great for me. So that just shows again about the individual approach of every athlete. What's really worked for me, learning to listen to my body. Your body lets you know what is working and what isn't. We sometimes ignore the signs because we enjoy certain things, but the signs are there. If you still feel hungry after eating, it might be because you're getting the nutrients you need, so your body is still asking you, you feed it. If you're feeling tired or heavy after eating 2 servings of pasta or a piece of cake, it might be that you just need to work on moderation. So for me, I try to get all of the nutrients I need without feeling hungry or tired. That means limiting carbs and eating more proteins and vegetables will leave me feeling energetic and ready to perform. So she's a basketball player. So in general, we probably wouldn't recommend just proteins, but she feels right for that and the success speaks for her. So I'm also not afraid to treat myself. I don't want to feel like life is a constant diet. If I really want something that I wouldn't consider healthy, I will eat it. But I understand those things won't necessarily leave me ready to perform. So I eat them in moderation. So that here again, it's still about enjoyment. And also she as a pro athlete is still having her cheat meals, but obviously further away from the competition. But also in that sense, yeah, it's still about enjoyment, still about humans, even though she knows about the performance and the importance of nutrition. Then we have here Tori Bowie, a world champion sprinter, and she says eat your fruits and veggies. So when it comes to nutrition, I keep it extremely simple. On a day-to-day basis, try to get most of my nutrients based upon the food pyramid, emphasizing the produce. Whether it's fruit or in juice smoothies or snacking or chopped cucumbers, I found that both fruit and vegetables are great sources to stay hydrated. My strength coach makes his duty to remind me use of that. So that's also, I would say, work as a nutritionist. We remind them constantly, be around, just giving them small hints, but obviously keep them engaged. Another pro athlete, Rebecca Soni, 6-time Olympic medalist in swimming, eat small and eat often, what I just mentioned before, in 4 to 6 meals. So swimmers are endless hungry. I could eat a big meal and be hungry within an hour. Instead of eating a lot during one sitting, I learned to eat small and eat often. You should feel like you go for a run after a meal. I also focus on clean foods to help keep my recovery time quick and keep me feeling good. By eating lighter meals more often, I started feeling better in my workout and throughout the day. It's not just about eating well to prepare for competition, but eating well while training and then maintaining that through competition. So that's a common issue we see sometimes, that people don't feel right for the training, as in they want to lose some muscle mass, but obviously we still want to perform them on training and in training, as in they need to get better, and that's just by training. So they also have to fuel well for that. And then we have here Emma Coburn. So she's steeplechase world champion, and she says refuel immediately. The best piece of advice I received about eating is that eating right after workout is very important. There is a short window, 30 to 60 minutes after workout, where your body can restore the glycogen in your muscles. Eating right after workout will help your muscles recover and prepare your fat the next day's workout. I've always bring a bar, a banana, or smoothie with me to have as soon as my workout ends. So that speaks about the availability of food, that she's aware that she needs to bring that, even though the coach might still be there and still provide it, but she's aware she eats right after the training. Second last, so Elena Myers-Taylor, Olympic silver medalist in bobsled. So keep everything in moderation. About 8 hours ago, my then coach, Dan Puff, said this: everything in moderation. He believes nutrition is about eating the proper food, but not restricting yourself too much. So it should be still enjoyable and individualized. It took me years to finally get it. I've been on every diet possible, and now working with a nutrition company called Working Against Gravity. I'm leaner than I've ever been, and I always do it with them. Is my count in macros, which is counting carbs, protein, and fats, balancing them to meet my training needs. So here we speak about individual athlete, and that might be still possible as a nutritionist working with her, tracking the macronutrients. But with a team sport, it might be difficult if you're just one person, but that's probably how future leads us to, that we're getting also there in this individualized approach. So here we have pro athlete Alicia Monteiro, 7 times US champion in track and field. And here I actually took a picture of her being pregnant, because she's a unique case that she even performed when pregnant, and that coming back to the special case scenario, how we actually do that with nutrition, but also from a physical aspects, how we still can agree on that, being professional and pregnant and not making any implication to the pregnancy. So think of your body as a machine that needs to be well oiled and well fed. If you think about a premium vehicle, you give it premium fuel. I think of myself as the best car out there. I'm not going subpar because I want my vehicle to operate in a manner that's elite. It's a personal decision. But for me, I have a choice between conventional fruits and vegetables or organic. I'm going with the organic. I want the best of the best in everything I put in my body. I also try to make sure my food is working for me. I'm going to make pizza for myself. And here again, pizza can be a healthy option. Use oat or quinoa flour that's really packed with protein. I'll put yogurt to my oatmeal and toss in some nuts for breakfast that will stick in my belly and get me through my workout. I add tart cherries because that's beneficial in recovery to help with inflammation. I don't have a diet with a name. I'm not paleo or vegan. I eat food and I eat real food. It's all about balance. I got for unprocessed when I can. Obviously, but I hang out with friends for time and time and get pizza to get a ball game and a hot dog. So those are the things, again, should just give you a scope of how those athletes overcome that and how they implement it. And that's our role, to work with them as best as we can and support them. So that's the last one. It's a pro athlete, Elina Haidt, Olympic snowboarder and X Games gold medalist. She's saying, eat for what you're doing today. She's saying, I used to eat pretty much the same type of food and portion of macronutrients, no matter what my day consisted of. So that's about nutrition periodization. Now I base my meals, snacks, and recovery foods on the type of exercise I'm doing, how intense it is, and what I'm expecting on my body after I'm eating. I have found that this outlook has given me a way more energy and helped me fuel in a smarter, more suitable way. So I hope those 7 examples give you now an idea how it looks in the real world and how elite athletes apply it. And that's so far also with my presentation. I want to end that with another video of a sports nutritionist in an applied setting, more from a player's perspective also, that you see how it looks there, and give you a last idea how it looks with the Gatorade football team that's there.
Country are turning to nutrition so they can take the next step in performance. Here at Florida, Collier Perno and her staff are.
One of my big phrases is you can't out-train a poor diet. So, of course, what you do in the weight room is going to have a huge impact on your body composition, but so does your diet.
Especially on this off season, I really needed help, just trimming some stuff down. And she was really there for me.
My gosh, Collier is the best I've ever had. She's so individually based. She knows exactly what every single person needs.
She's a health critic, so sometimes I don't like what she picked, but I know it's for the best of us. So don't tell her I said that. But she takes care of us. She puts the right stuff in our bodies, and it helps us to perform.
The Florida nutrition staff does a good job of fueling the Gators for practice, but they also do a good job of making sure these players have everything they need here at the Swamp for home games. But their biggest task is making sure these players have everything they need on the road.
Check the drawers on that side, see if we have the shoes and fruit cups in there still.
So essentially on road games, we need to pack up the facility and move it for 24 hours. The number one thing I want is for it to be consistent. I want it to feel like it's a home game.
She always has what you need. She always is going to have, what you're used to. It's never going to be anything different, because football, it's a big routine thing. So, you're not going to want to change up your routine.
I have a packing list. I'll meet with the hotel, our operations person, and we'll kind of go back and forth. They'll send the banquet event order. I'll go through it, make edits, making sure we get specific products we're looking for, specific brands we're looking for.
Cheddar, original, Awesome.
So we'll overpack by a lot because if there's a rain delay, especially and we're not home, we don't have backup storage. We've got to have enough stuff to get them through.
These snacks do have a specific purpose, whether it is something like a chip or popcorn. It does provide them with carbohydrates that will really quickly get into their blood system and help them perform, but it also has a lot of salt in it.
When you're an athlete and you're exercising, you're sweating, you actually lose a good amount of sodium in your sweat. So sodium is an electrolyte that helps with muscle contraction and relaxation. So if someone is low on sodium, they could be at increased risk for cramping. Pickle juice, we do a lot of pickle juice shots right before kickoff. It's liquid, it's easy, and they're just used to it. We do it every day before practice, every day before home games.
And if you notice, it's a lot of like fruit snacks, the Gatorade chews, Rice Krispie treats, and they're all going to be simple, broken down carbohydrates to really get back in their bloodstream.
Eating at the stadium is really super important because guys will have a lot of superstition about what they want to eat exactly before kickoff, what they eat in halftime. And if we run out of something or if something's missing, it'll throw them.
Rick Wells loves his shake. He always asks probably like 3 times a day for his PB&J shake.
We make sure he gets one of those every game day. KT grabs the 2 bottles of strawberry Nesquik.
Some of us are like that. Some of us don't care. Some of us just want to eat. But my thing is fried chicken. I need my fried chicken.
The fried chicken. I don't know about the Nesquik thing, but I like the fried chicken. And then I always got to have, on the Friday nights, I always got to have the ice cream with hot chocolate fudge.
Chick-fil-A is not only a crowd pleaser, but they're also super dependable. I mean, the guys know exactly what the food's going to taste like. They're always on time. Food's always good quality, and it's just a good, consistent post-game meal on the road.
She does a great job of. There's not one time that you don't have something to eat. On a road trip, whether it be on a plane, whether it be getting to the hotel, there's always something there for us to eat and snack on. And that's one of the best things I think she does on the road games is just making sure we're always eating. There's always snacks out and just keeping nutrients in our body.
It's always excess amount. She makes sure there's never you're going to run out or anything. She's awesome. That's the best.
Pernod's work is never over. Her staff just completed planning the road game to Vandy, but she's already focused on the postseason. The Gators are now bowl eligible, and Pernod's already making grocery lists to make sure their postseason run will go smoothly. Here at the Swamp, I'm Jackie Franchuli for Gators Territory.
So here again is just a practical example of how it looks on the field. So what different considerations we need to take into account. I guess that showed you now how important it is. And then I will just end up and leave it to the question and answer. Speaking, I guess, now enough. Thank you, Tanjabat. And you can just contact me via any of these medias, preferably on email if it's regarding sports nutrition. So thank you so much, and yeah, open for your questions.
Thank you, Ian, for the great presentation. You have spiked the audience interest. I've received many questions, but I understand you need to leave at 3:30 Singapore time for your training. Would that be okay if you stay a little bit longer, like 20 minutes?
Yeah, I can probably arrange 20 minutes, so 3:30 will be now. So yeah, probably 20 minutes should be able to.
Okay, cool, thank you. So let's start with the first question. So how would you meet the energy requirement of an athlete?
Once again, how would you?
How would you meet the energy requirement of an athlete? I think they are asking about how do you decide on the energy requirement for an athlete?
So obviously there are different formulas to calculate it. Those are just a rough idea. So we probably calculate it there, and every athlete is different. So if we speak just of one individual athlete, we would calculate his energy requirements and then just along the way track them. If he loses weight or if he gains weight with our energy requirements, what we are setting, and should they be too high, too low, we just increase here and there. And then according to the sports and the training, we adjust the carbohydrate intake, the protein intake, the fat intake. Here also is about preference. So even though we prescribe something, we still want to have the feedback of our players, of our athletes, because as good as we are and as good as we are prescribing it, it might not be for his body working like it is. So that being said, yeah, we calculate it and then we track it over the way and we get feedback from the athlete, and also obviously the body weight measurement, that we have some objective stuff and body fat, if we're actually achieving the aim we want to for each athlete, because each athlete is different. Some might want to lose body fat, some might want to lose some strength, or gain muscle mass. So there we're just according to the goal of each athlete, we value them differently.
All right, great answer, Jan. So the next question is how nutrition prioritization is used as a strategy in intervention during pre and post sports events.
So the nutrition periodization is more regarding, I would say, on a macro, micro, and meso cycle. So if we go for the entire season, we periodicize there. However, we usually go from a week and a daily basis. So on a weekly basis, speaking about a football team, we know on a Saturday is usually the game. Then on a Sunday is usually the recovery day. Monday, they might have off on a Tuesday, then they slowly ramp up. So that's where we're also ramping up the carbohydrates. So according to that loading physically, we're also changing the nutritional periodization or loading. So it's more about the weekly stuff rather than just the pre and post meal. However, the pre and post meal is still important, but it's mainly going to be the same because we always have the same football game. It's always 90 minutes, unless we should be in a tournament and have a game 2 days after again. But however, there we just want to stick to their routine. We don't want to change too much. So if we try and implement some new stuff, we do that in training, but not on a game, because as a game, as in we're in a high performance setting, is still about performance and winning and losing. And if the nutrition is not on point there, and if they don't like it, that's something that comes back. So we rather try in training to adjust that, and also post season or post training or post game, to make their adjustments accordingly. So the nutrition periodization is more on a weekly basis, on a mesocycle rather than a microcycle.
Yeah. So how do you manage nutrition for athletes who are vegans or vegetarians?
Yeah, that is a difficult topic and a different topic, but it's still doable. So being smart and, for example, combining different foods to have a higher nutritional value, as in, for example, potatoes and eggs, which is still vegetarian, which we might overcome. So on a vegetarian diet, I would say still it works. We just have to be more cautious and still emphasize and incentivize our athletes regarding that, because vegetarians might lack in some nutrients and even micronutrients. So there also supplementation might come into place. If we obviously have some objective measurements of what they're lacking in, we don't just give them vitamins and say it should be beneficial, because maybe they're not lacking in that. So we have to be precise and be objective. And coming down to vegans, that's challenging, but it's still possible. So there we really have to work closely with the preferences of the athlete, what he likes, and how to overcome that is very, very difficult regarding protein needs. And how we overcome that, I guess, carbohydrates is something we definitely, with vegan and vegetarians, we won't have any problems, neither with fats. The protein is something we consider, but nowadays there are even some vegan or vegetarian supplements out there. So we just need to be more cautious, but it's still possible, and we need to deal with that. Those, I would not say a special population, but a special group. So this is how we go along there.
Okay, so the next question is, how do you suggest proportion of fat for energy? I think they mean like how much fat should an athlete eat in a day?
I mean, in general, we say what was just written there, between 20 to 30% of their daily calorie intake, and that also differs according to sports and as well as the athletes. So that being said here, for example, if we speak about more an endurance athlete, as a triathlete or marathon athlete, he even goes up to 40, 50. That's very, very much individual, and also the type of the season he's at. As in, for high intensity sports, fat is not the main fuel. So there we can potentially reduce, and we don't want to eat too much fat, especially around training or around game, as it is very, very hard to digest, and it takes longer to digest. So yeah, I mean, in every instance, at every point of the season and in training and on different days, we also periodicize here. But in general, we say 20 to 30. Protein and carbohydrates are usually the main portion, and then we usually have their daily energy requirements. So then we usually use this kind of spare percentage to integrate the fat. If it's 20, if it's 25, it's 30. So also here individual preference, and also if they want to change their body composition, that's probably where we're tweaking on the fat rather than on the carbohydrates and the proteins.
Thank you, and please don't forget to turn off your microphone during the Q&A session. And for the
if I'm turning my microphone off, then no one is hearing me anymore.
No, not you, of course.
Mm-hmm.
The next question is quite specific. What might be the cause for sudden death of bodybuilders at a young age?
Once again, what might be the
cause for sudden death of a bodybuilder at a young age? So it is quite enough.
The sudden death, or?
Yeah, the sudden death of bodybuilders at a young age.
So that's a good question. I assume that's mostly related to banned substances. So we saw that a lot back in the Soviet Union, where usually people are taking banned substances or steroids or testosterone or all this kind of stuff. So they're doping. That's usually the cause. People might die on a young age. Other than that, I wouldn't just relate it to nutrition. There are a lot of values which I don't want to judge and come into place. But if we're speaking about the general phenomenon, if this person was speaking about this case, then back then it was about the doping and banned substances. We see that usually in weightlifting athletes or in these bodybuilding athletes that they take these steroids, which lead potentially to death.
It is a great answer, Jens. So the next question, for low intensity and long period sport, is carbohydrate loading effective for low intensity and long period of sport?
Yes, I would say still effective, even though from a low intensity and long duration one, the main source is fat. However, if we're reaching a later stage, also the fat can't just fuel anymore. And the carbohydrates are then just a buffer which we use and which we still take. So we just don't go in a long intensity event, as speak in a marathon, without having full glycogen stores, because we still need them potentially at the initial stage, at some stage. So also their carbohydrate loading is still an essential tool to increase performance and have full glycogen storage. I would say 48 hours prior to the session, we can slowly start doing that.
Okay, the next question is carbohydrate loading possible for short-term sports?
Is carbohydrate loading
possible for short-term sports?
I'm not certain about the question about short-term sports, what that is.
I think like if they play for a short time, is that what they mean? They play for a short time?
I mean, carbohydrate loading is, I would say, more applicable for high performance sports. So if you just go leisurely playing for some squash or some football, unless you want to really high perform, I would say is not needed. So we're speaking about athletes who train daily 1 to 2 hours a day. And if we really perform on a match day, let's say on each Saturday, then it might be a strategy. However, in the general population, our glycogen stores are full because we're eating a lot of carbohydrates. It's rather than if you are pro athlete or athlete who trains excessively daily, then your glycogen stores might be deplenished. Other than that, I would say you don't need to do that.
Okay, so how many meals in average
can and as much calorie dense as we can. So if we speak about the day the athlete wakes up at 6, maybe have 2 sessions and goes back to sleep at 10, then we just try to get as much in as possible, not negatively influencing their performance or training. So if he trains at 9, he probably has a big breakfast at 6. He probably still has some pre-training snack 1 hour beforehand. Then right after he getting probably shaking some fluid stuff. And 2 hours, 3 hours after he's having again potentially his lunch, and he's having another snack before his afternoon session. Right after his session, he's having another snack, then dinner, and then potentially pre-bed snack. So it can go up to 8, 9 small meals if we consider the pre and the post workout. So there we're just implementing as much as we can if it's for the comfort of the athlete. So yeah, it can go even up to 8, 9 small portions.
Okay, thank you for the elaborate answer, Jens. And the next question, is there any difference in the diet between the training days and the day before the event?
Yes, I mean, this just comes down to the nutritional periodization, so that we periodize there. So according to the training, which training day it is and how far it might be out, we might not need that many carbohydrates. Then on a match day -1, as in a match day -1, yeah, there's a carbohydrate loading day, so we're fueling up on carbohydrates. On another day, if the training might not be that high, or even on a recovery day, we might use different nutritional strategies. So it's not always the same. No.
Okay, the next question. So we will accept like 2 more questions before we wrap up the session. So the next question, for mountain trekkers, where they go hiking for like 15 to 20 days, what diet should they apply?
So that's a question if we speak about high performance or if we potentially speak just about leisurely trekking. But also here, if we just leisurely trekking is a demanding sport, and I assume he or she is not just hiking for 2 to 3 hours a day, probably an entire day, and making a big tour. So there we need to have fuel accessible all the time. So if it is in sports drinks, also here mainly the fuel is fat, but we still need carbohydrate because it's just very, very low intensity. So we can stock up on fat because that's the main source of our energy, not neglecting carbohydrates. Yeah, I mean, fat and carbohydrates are the main sources, and for recovery, then and in between, we can still implement protein, as it might not affect our performance or our hiking too much, as it is not of high intensity.
Okay, for the final question we have is, what is the best sport for a clinical dietitian to start working as a sports dietitian? What is the least troublesome sport regarding nutrition management? Well, that's a great question.
That's a difficult question, and probably we can discuss a lot about that, which is the most ideal. If you're really interested in that area, I guess you can start with any sports. It might be most easy starting on an individual athlete, because there you really have to go into detail. If it is a team setting, it might be difficult at the initial start reaching out to every athlete. However, there probably more about nutrition education. So I would say there is no sports which is easy. Even you just work with an individual athlete. Even in Nepal, you have a lot of cricket people. So you can just start probably going to a cricket team, start there, do a bit of nutritional counseling, education, offer that for free. And I guess along the way, they will jump on the board if they see the benefits. So it can be any sports, and rather start and go out there than sitting too far back, because if we have these specialists, and in Nepal and across the world, they should go out, even though I know till now the nutritionist job is not as well appreciated as other jobs in federations, and might not be seen as of a higher importance. But I guess in the current age, we still get into that area, and it's getting of higher importance, and it's making the first stepping in there. And it's enjoyable, even though I'm not wouldn't say I'm a full-time nutritionist. It's just a side area which I need to cover. So I'm still working on field as a fitness coach and strength and conditioning coach, but obviously that goes hand in hand, and I'm still a football coach. But all these areas obviously come together, and being aware of the nutrition, obviously the player should be as well, as it contributes and positively impacts my job as well. So yeah, go out and try any sports.
Thank you, Jens, for the really great answers. We had such a great Q&A session with you. Thank you for that. So right now, we are now at the end of today's webinar. So I'd like to welcome the Vice President of Nepal Dietitian Association, Madam Rashmi Shrestha, to close the event with a vote of thanks and a closing remark. So Madam, would you do the honor?
Thank you, Mo. Namaste, and good afternoon, everybody. We are here. We are very glad to have you all in this today's webinar on nutrition assessment and sports nutrition. In this wonderful event, I would like to deliver heartfelt gratitude to our expected speakers. Despite of their busy schedule, they give us valuable time to share knowledge and experience with us. I take the golden opportunity to thank our first speaker, Dr. Wantanee, Associate Professor, Institute of Nutrition, Mahidol University, Thailand. She gave us very practical approach in nutrition screening and assessment. It will definitely help all new as well as working dietitian in their practice. I feel more privileged to thank you, our second speaker, respected Mr. John Eiberger, certified nutritionist and fitness coach, Football Association of Singapore. Thank you, Mr. Zin, for sharing your valuable knowledge and experience on sports nutrition. I would like to express my special thanks to Ms. Moe, dietitian from Myanmar, for moderating and coordinating this event. Thank you, Ms. Moe. And I would like to thank Senior Dietitian Nani Sake, President of Nepal Dietitian Association. She has always been source of motivation for all the dietitian in Nepal. And I would like to thank Mr. Milan Dahal, Ms. Rosina Vista, Mr. Sailesh Pandey, and Mr. Dipendra Paudel for technical support and logistic management. At last but not least, I would like to deliver my special thanks to all the participants. Your presence is very valuable. Without you, this webinar is would not be successful. Thank you all for active participation. Once again, thank you all. Take care and bye. Thank you. Namaste.
Thank you. Namaste. Bye-bye. Good night. Day.
So take care, everybody.
Thank you, ma'am. Namaste.
James, thank you very much.
Thank you, ma'am. It's a very informative session.
Thank you.
Thank you.